let's officially welcome you, AJ Thomas, to the People Leader Accelerator Podcast. Thank you. AJ, you and I met, I don't know, 7-ish years ago.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I remember I was volunteering as an alumni of the Berkeley Executive Coaching Institute,
Yeah.
and you were going through it at the time.
Yeah.
And we got semi-randomly paired up to be coach and coachee. I was your coachee when you were going through the program virtually. And after that, I was, I'm so impressed by her. She's amazing. I asked you to blurb my book, Scaling for Success. You've become a part of People Tech Partners. You've been the main MC with Transform. You are all over the place doing all sorts of cool stuff. I had lunch with you at your office back at Google X, and you showed me the children's book that you and it was your daughter wrote.
Yeah. My daughter and I wrote that. Yeah. And then we had another opportunity to write a kids book series, a kids book about teams, which is now on Penguin Random House's.
Oh my goodness. I hit what are probably not even the highlights of your background that might be relevant to the audience. Do you mind sharing a little bit more about what you're doing today and what you're working on?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, as with anything, I'm always evolving. I like to say in these things, my career is a series of things and jobs I've never done before, including the job I'm doing now. I have a very varied background that I would say the thread of it is really around being a super learner. So started out in a sales capacity, went into operations, even did support engineering at one point in my career, worked for customer support and then product management and then HR operations, and then was able to grow into that space, went into talent development, went into recruiting, eventually collecting some of these learnings and applying them, and then serving in my first executive CHRO role, working for some pretty amazing leaders in that space. My challenge as a first-time executive was a M&A, a joint venture, and a carve-out. And then really went in and created a way in which I was then learning in the space of Alphabet's Moonshot factory, Google X, where I spent a majority of my time really leading all of global talent and human experience design and our people products team, AKA anything that was happening in learning and development, people analytics, also in HR operations, comp and total rewards. And so you think about like all of these things as people products, and then the experience layer and design of that, and had an amazing run with the team and just a lot of really great learnings there. And then now really working in these 3 concentric circles: capital as a founder and general partner of a early stage venture firm; culture, which is leaning into a lot of the work that I do still in the people space, but also go to market, business, future of work, and then AI and systems building with the Troublemaker Lab. And then community, because I'm also part owner and investor in a venue collective in San Francisco that essentially becomes a go-to-market landing pad for founders, investors, and the communities and things that I am a part of. So yeah, that's kind of full circles.
And I love that you call it the Troublemaker Lab as well. Maybe we can just touch on that for a brief moment before we start to go through these circles and understand just the amazing perspectives that you're seeing and pulling through right now. How'd you come up with this title, Troublemaker Lab, and what trouble are you guys getting up to?
Yeah. So for the Troublemaker Lab, I think for me, it's always been just really, I've always been a master of ceremonies of mischief. But when I think about the Troublemaker Lab, the spirit of that really is being able to have enough courage to jump into something that is chaotic, have enough courage to buck things that may seem like it's been going well for a while, but you can not just get like an incremental impact, but a monumental impact around that. I mean, a lot of the work that we do is really activating individuals, teams, and organizations at the intersection of self, health, and wealth. And when we say wealth, we don't talk about dollars, we talk about time and resources. So we're really a resource for founders, new executives, or new business units in organizations that are forming that are probably more of your skunkworks types of teams. So those are typically the kind of clients that we'll get are from large enterprises that are starting to put together innovative business units, and they don't really know what that looks like, especially now in the age of AI. It's not about transformation initiatives that we're going after as a Troublemaker Lab. We're actually going after what are the new frontier ways in which teams are being formed, or go-to-market strategies are being executed. So it's a very interesting space that we're making trouble in.
I'd love to double click into that, like the new frontiers of organizations and how they're getting formed. What are some of the things that you're seeing or noticing or experimentations that are happening?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think we'd all have to be living under a rock if we didn't know the whole explosion. It's like we had a second chat GPT moment earlier this year with OpenClaw coming out and everybody actually being able to build their own solutions. I think in our work, we're seeing a lot of personal AI platform development and then a big push on enterprise platform development, but there's still not a focus on how are the humans doing with that. We don't know where these things end up. Sometimes they'll end up on the people side of the house, and sometimes they'll end up on the technology side of the house. Most times products trying to triangulate what that actually means, or sometimes we're merging AI transformation and people together. So we're seeing a lot of these very different things, which I'm sure everybody here is seeing as well, of roles being mashed together. And the cool thing is we're kind of like a really good mixer if we were in a bar as HR and people, because we mix with any drink. You know, if you wanted a good drink, you're always going to have people in that mix. And so I think that's what we're seeing is there's all of these multimodal applications of how we think about doing the people and the human work within this space, whether it's in coaching, right? One of the spaces I'm exploring right now is imagining a world where you're not just coaching individual humans or team of humans, but what does the world look like when you're coaching AI agents? Not prompting, actual coaching of an agent and a platform. So like we're looking at this like kind of techno-human frontier. How do we develop in that? What is still human? Is it a human in the loop or is it AI in the loop?
Love the emphasis on humans, even during this age of artificial intelligence, and maximizing the positive outcomes from that. My undergrad was in industrial organizational psychology back at University of Illinois, and that was how humans work with systems.
Yeah.
And kind of the converse of that was Mach-E, which was like how machines create systems themselves. And like here we are 30 years later, like putting it all together, the jigsaw puzzle a little bit differently. AJ, I guess I'd ask for our audience of mid to senior level HR leaders, like the stuff that you're doing is cutting edge and creative and formulating and the idea generation, making stuff work. What can somebody that's inside an organization in a top HR role or aspiring to a top HR role, like how do they intake all this? Like, what do they do with this? Where should somebody like that get started?
Here's what I love about this, because it's a universal principle. Get really, really good at experimentation. Before you lean into that, I think thinking about how do you even define experimentation for yourself personally and for your organization? I've talked about this a few times in other talks and groups I've been a part of, where experimentation is the race to get whatever facts you need to put on the table to get it approved in your annual operating plan. I'm running this experiment to get this thing and I get this platform. I'm going to have this budget. It was an experiment. It went well. If you're doing experimentation well, it doesn't go well. So if you're doing experimentation well, you're doing it for the service of what you want to learn so that you can actually figure out what it is that you want to de-risk. And so in the science space, they talk about this thing as a design of experiment. Get really good at first defining it, then get really good at designing it, then get really good at delivering it. So how do we pull that forward? If you are defining experimentation as I found this really cool HR tool platform that's going to make or break my organization, and I'm going to put in an experimental budget to try it with one business unit and then push it down the track and it's all good and ready to roll and I'm going to get it funded next quarter, that's probably spirit-wise great, but probably not how you want to be thinking about it if you want it to be sustainable. Defining it as what are the 3 or 4 things we want to learn from this experiment and how do we design the kill criteria? How quickly can I kill the idea of embedding a brand new compensation analysis tool? How quickly can I kill the idea of bringing another new AI coaching platform? How quickly can I kill the idea of embedding agents or embedding new something into my employee lifecycle because there's this fancy tool that I saw at this conference or like that I was marketed to? Because I think that discussion helps you have the intellectual honesty with your HR leader to say, is this really going to solve for the strategy that we're going after?
This discussion around killing the idea, this happens before you've invested in it. It's that pre-mortem element that we bring to the table. And it's so fascinating to hear you talking about this, because when I think about Google X and Moonshots, I feel like you need to give space and time to ideas to let them breathe and live. And so how do you think about that trade-off of like killing ideas fast versus this creativity element that often gets associated with like, give it more time, maybe collect more data around this thing?
Oh, I love that you call that out, because the folks at the factory, like that really is our bread and butter, is where do you think the extra breathing time and space comes from? It comes from you killing an idea so you can take that energy and capacity of innovation towards something else and apply the learning you already have. So you're not sitting there working through that fallacy of sunk cost. Because I've already been working on it for 2 years, I need to see this through. And sometimes HR initiatives are like that. I mean, the platforms are designed, implementation teams are designed. What if instead of an implementation team, you pushed your platforms or providers to have an iteration team? I'm not here just to implement this thing. I want to iterate against it on these 3 different milestones. If we can't hit this specific part of the experiment and we've proved it wrong, let's celebrate that. I think there are just different ways in which this up and coming people leaders and HR folks can really challenge the vendors and partners that are coming in and pitching them about the new technology and the ways in which work can be done, make more efficient or effective, by saying, instead of what are the use cases of successes that you've had, what are some smart experiments you've run with a company just like mine? What have you actually run as far as experiments? Because it's going to tell me how you approach building your technology and what impact and value it's actually going to bring for us. And one main lesson that I learned at Google X was the fact that the sooner you can get over yourself, you will go from incremental impact to monumental impact very quickly, because you will take that time that you would have spent and compounded it against X amount more experiments that you can do. And that is the creativity, is to be able to see the other side of it and to see that success can be defined by you actually pulling that nugget and experimenting and then iterating and experimenting and iterating. So yeah, I think like that mindset for us as a people, industry, and organizations, more of that is going to be needed, especially in the age of technological advancement that we're in.
Maybe drawing a connection to an operator's role inside a small to mid-sized business. That experimentation has to be founded in what the business is trying to accomplish. So at X, you're trying to change the world. You're trying to create a massive business. If you're inside an org that's trying to sell software or whatever we try to do nowadays, we can experiment with HR and management practices that will help drive that outcome.
Yeah.
But at the same time, human judgment is needed to identify what do we need to experiment on versus what do we don't. Like, do we need to experiment with a new video hosting platform? Do we need to experiment with a new type of office chair? Like some things you can just do. And some things are actually worthy experiments because they could be game changing. I guess that's where the judgment applies, or is there some framework that you've turned to?
Well, I mean, I think the thing is that experiments can come in all kinds of sizes, but I think what I'm talking about is not a binary of what is an experiment. It's a mindset of how do you actually define what that means for you, whether you're embedded in a large business unit in a Fortune 500 or 100 organization, or you're in a small to mid-sized company that's 5 to 10,000 employees, or you're in a really tiny startup that's really just starting to accelerate and pivot all the time. I think that spirit of being able to, number one, just have the courage to ask the question. And to your point, Andrew, like it goes back to the design of the experiment. If you were designing an experiment just because you feel like this thing's really cool and I want to bring it in, I don't think that's an experiment. But a design of experiment requires you to be able to go, if the business strategy is that I need to hire 130 people by the end of this year in this specific business unit, what are the things that I actually need to make sure are part of what I can test to ensure that I can do that in this amount of time? Yeah. And so here's a really interesting framework. And I do this a lot in our coaching practice with the lab. individual teams and organizations get this, and we call it the power design question. How might I, X is a variable, the thing I'm trying to do, so that Y, the outcome. It sounds so stupid simple, but the cool thing is the variables of X and Y will always be the input and the outcome. Like, what am I actually trying to accomplish in this input? Like, how might I hire 130 people by the end of the year so that it contributes to X amount of revenue, the third quarter, or whatever it may be for you and whatever you're putting together. How might I implement a new video training program for my new sales teams that are coming on board so that it contributes to 15% of the pre-qualified pipelines that are coming through for our go-to-market strategy for our small business sales, whatever it may be, as exact as you can be on the variables. That's the power design question that you can use for your experimental thesis.
What I love about that, it's connected to the what are we doing and so what, right? And then the next question, yes, is now what do we do with this now that we know the what and the so what?
I love that you say that, because here's what I see in different cycles. Most of my clients come in when they've done the thing backwards. First, they go with what? And then they're like, well, now what? And then they're like, so what? They're like, oh, crap. We should have gone, oh, okay. Well, like the what's are the bookends, right? Instead of going backwards on it, because then they figure out, wow, if we had only just done that thing at that layer of the principles and what we were trying to do at first. And again, people mistake it as they think that takes a very long time. It doesn't. It's like, what is the X and what is the Y? What are we trying to accomplish and what is the outcome of what that looks like? What is the what and so as we get to the now what? And then redefine how. Because after the now what, oh, how? How do we iterate? How do we build? How do we this and that? And so I love that you say that, because yeah, we always are going backwards and like, oh, okay. So we didn't actually figure out what we were going to do with this. And then it turns into what the F,
Now let's add in the AI layer into this, because I think there was always this challenge of taking that step up front to say what and so what. I'm seeing with AI, it is becoming easier and cheaper for companies to just go, what? And so how are you working with clients who are very tempted to just say, let's just throw spaghetti against the wall because it's become really cheap to be able to do that? There's no longer this high cost to the build.
It has never been easier to get into the enterprise. Here's what I'm seeing in the investment space as well. I just spent 2 days at Startup Grind in every possible sector: climate, future of work, AI, applied AI, vertical, technology, you name the industry. Like, I probably introduced close to 95 different startups in each of these different spaces and seen all of the different problems and things they were looking after. And what I would say is, like, the area of AI that's been really, really interesting that we as an organization or people team are really poised to master is being the ones that look at it as not a technology solution. AI is not a technology solution. Before you even get to the technology, you have to figure out what you actually want it to do first. When generative AI started really doing this thing, and then we were getting all these art, and Sora came out with OpenAI in the video, which they now killed, they called it the season of beautiful garbage. We're in that season of beautiful garbage right now with the agentic layer, because everyone's building agents, killing agents, doing all these things. Like, you can get an OpenClaw instance connected to your MCP and all of this stuff and build an agent and sounds so sexy. But then what do you actually do when you have to have it touch your data? Then everyone goes, oh, the security. Oh, the security. What's the security layer? You could have addressed that by putting the guardrails in front of it before you just started opening Pandora's box, right? But we're not a function of coulda, woulda, shouldas. I think for the up and coming HR leaders and the leaders that are being tasked with the doership of all the thought leadership we're getting hit with AI, I would say you're in such a prime position to come back and say, how would we solve this if it was not a technology solution we were after? Number one, you go back to first principles. It has never been more important for us to lean on the humanity and the skills that we have with our intuition and our gut and our intellect before we go and outsource that to a thing. Because here's where you're going to spend a lot of your time: in QA, debugging the agent, or going back and debugging the platform. And that is actually not a good use of time. The good use of time is do it here at first and train it as if you're parenting almost. And guess what? Like we as an industry are so poised well for that. What we need to be armed with is the courage to ask the question, what if this AI thing we're trying to implement was actually not a technological solution we were after? What is the human outcome that we want by putting this technology in? Why are we saying human in the loop and not AI in the loop? Because quite frankly, there are just some things that AI, you don't need to do with AI, but you will always have to do with a human being.
Judgment, discretion,
Discernment.
flexibility. These processes are not set in stone. But if you automate it and agentify it, then you've got to go QA it and adjust it. Whereas a human, in theory, would be able to adapt.
I was telling you a really funny, ironic thing that happened 2 days ago. I'm emceeing this amazing panel on vertical and applied AI. Some of the most amazing investors in this space. The moderator stuck in traffic. I don't know who this panel is because I'm only briefing kind of the big overall, here's the show, who's on stage. There's going to be 36 people coming through the stage, bring the vibe, the energy. And the conference organizer was like, our moderator's not going to be here. Can you moderate the panel? And I said, ironically, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to do something that AI cannot do. Live replace IRL, a moderator on this panel. I have just met you all for the very first time. Let's talk about what you do. And we had 20 minutes and delivered some of the most amazing insights because what that took was judgment, presence, and being able to meet the moment. Technology, even in its amazingness form of what it is now with AI, and even when we were wowed by all the SaaS that came out, I just don't think we'll ever be able to replace presence.
For our audience, some of the takeaways, I think, start with the end in mind. Start with the goal, not necessarily the solution, whether it's AI or another technology. HR leaders, please start with what you're trying to move. Is that accelerating your product roadmap? Is that increasing revenue? Is that reducing cost through increased productivity? Like, be really clear about what goal you're trying to achieve.
Right.
And then maybe we can use some tools to help us brainstorm, but get creative about what those solutions are. Whether you're an HR person or a marketing person or in some other function, start with the right thing to work on rather than implementing this thing that you did at your last place or this thing that somebody just tried to sell you at a very nice dinner. Start with the end in mind, and that will inform what solutions you can experiment with.
Exactly.
AJ, how would you say that? What other advice would you give to HR leaders that are finding their way?
What I would say is we've had this whole battle with the status quo. Oh, challenge the status quo, do the status quo. I would say get curious about the status quo. Before you challenge something, you want to experiment it to do this thing because you saw something that could be done better because you did it better before somewhere else. I would just say get curious because there's so much around the context that I think as leaders we miss because we're so excited about the new thing that's happening. And I think what I'm saying here is just come back to the first principles. Number one, be that super learner and be curious about the status quo. Not enough that you're lost in it, but enough that you're informed to figure out what you actually want to change about it or what you actually want to challenge. Because challenging it is different from changing it, by the way. Just in that root of what are you trying to solve for? And not being afraid of being that person in the room when everyone's so excited, about the solution and we're getting ready to go. Almost unsell it when you feel that excitement in the room coming in. Hey, I just want to make sure I go back to this. I'm curious. Again, as a team, are we also on the same page of what we're trying to solve for? So I think that leads you to great experimentation. That leads you to really specific kill criteria that will reclaim your time, that will increase your credibility, and that will feed that wheel of allowing you to be more curious in whatever that variable is.
Love it. We have just 2 quick accelerator round questions for you. If you could only recommend 2 resources, whether it's books or newsletters or other learning resources for an emerging people leader to be learning from, which 2 sources from a super learner like you would make the cut?
Well, I would be remiss by not saying, hey, join the latest PLA cohort. So, 2 of the 2 books that I would recommend. One is People Leader Accelerator Podcast. It's a 3-part series. It's a 3-part series. make sure, I mean, the fact that you guys are having these kinds of conversations, I think consume it and look at it and pull those 2 to 3 insights and then share it as well. And I'm going to turn your question around because the second resource I would say is, I think in our industry, we need a little bit more self-belief. We should also not just be consuming content, but also contributing content. So if you are in the middle of your career right now in this space, you can contribute content by asking questions. Ask that next best question.
Amazing. And final question for our listeners who want to connect with you or follow you, where's the best place to find AJ?
Yeah, you'll find me on LinkedIn, but if you want some fun content and whatnot, I'm also on troublemakernovels.substack.com. It's all of my recent musings on tech and humanity. And then you can find me on Instagram at Hello AJ Thomas.
Wonderful. AJ, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for your insights. You're really on the edge of some very interesting things in investment, in AI, and in people. We would love to have you back and spend even more time.
Yes, and hopefully my agent doesn't join next time. Just kidding. It's been me this whole time. All right. Thank you, Brian.